Hey guys, tonight we are keeping secrets. The world is full of thieves, but in this workshop, we build the iron guardians that protect the king's gold. We are joining the medieval locksmith. We are going to engineer the complex puzzles that only one key can solve. This is a story about precision, security, and the satisfying click of a job well done. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Now, listen to the file on the steel, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The back room of the forge is different from the main workshop. You notice this immediately as you push through the heavy oak door and step inside, where the blacksmith works with fire and fury, hammering horseshoes and plowshares in clouds of spark and smoke. This chamber is a place of stillness. The air here is cooler, cleaner. The smell is distinct, not the acrid burn of hot iron and coal dust, but something more refined, fine oil, the kind pressed from seeds and filtered through cloth and metal filings. Tiny curls of steel and iron that catch the light from the single window, dancing in the shaft of afternoon sun like silver dust. Door behind you closes with a soft thud, and you hear the sound you came here to understand. The click, the bolt sliding home, the lock engaging. This door is locked. It is always locked. The locksmith does not work in the open. His craft is too valuable, too dangerous in the wrong hands. The mechanisms he creates are the barrier between security and chaos, between the merchant's fortune and the thief's blade. And so he works here, in this sealed chamber, where only he and his apprentice may enter. The room is smaller than you expected, perhaps 12 feet to a side. The walls are stone, thick and cold, the same granite blocks that form the castle's outer defenses. But here, inside, they are lined with shelves. Narrow wooden shelves, each one holding its own collection of mysteries. You see locks in various stages of completion. Some are just rough forgings, lumps of black iron still bearing the hammer marks of their birth. Others are nearly finished, their surfaces filed smooth, their mechanisms assembled, waiting only for their keys. And keys, so many keys. They hang from pegs driven into the wooden beams overhead, each one a unique shape, each one the solution to a single puzzle. The workbench dominates the center of the room. It is a heavy thing, built from oak planks as thick as your forearm, scarred and stained from years of use. The surface is not clean. It cannot be clean. It is covered in the evidence of work. Metal shavings curl in small piles near the vise. Drops of oil have soaked into the wood, leaving dark stains that will never wash out. There are tools everywhere. Files of different sizes, from thick rasps as long as your hand to needle files so delicate they might snap if you breathe on them wrong. Hammers. Small hammers, not the great sledges of the blacksmith, but precise instruments with heads no larger than your thumb. Punches, chisels, scribes. Each tool has its place, and each place is worn smooth from the locksmith's hand reaching for it, day after day, year after year. Locksmith himself stands at the bench. He is not a large man. He does not need to be. His strength is not in his muscles, but in his hands. Those hands are scarred, burned by hot metal, cut by sharp edges, calloused from gripping tools, but they are steady, perfectly steady. As you watch, he picks up a small piece of iron from the bench, holds it up to the light, examines it with eyes that miss nothing, and sets it down again in exactly the same spot. Every movement is deliberate, economic. There is no wasted motion in this room. He does not acknowledge your presence immediately. He is focused on the work before him, and this is good. This is right. Because to understand the locksmith, you must first understand the work. You must see the process. You must follow the iron from raw material to finished mechanism. You must learn to think in wards and pins, in tumblers and bolts. You must learn to see the invisible maze that exists inside every lock. So let us begin at the beginning. Let us begin with the concept, the fundamental principle that separates a lock from a simple latch, the ward. The ward is an obstruction. That is the simplest definition. Inside the lock there is a barrier, a piece of metal shaped in a specific way, positioned in a specific place, designed to prevent any object from passing through except the correct key. Imagine a corridor, a hallway. Now imagine that someone has built a wall across that hallway, not a complete wall, not a solid barrier, but a wall with a hole cut in it, a very specific hole, a unique shape. Now, if you want to walk down that hallway, you must fit through that hole. You must be the right size, the right shape. If you are too tall, you will hit your head. If you are too wide, you will not fit. Only a person of exactly the right dimensions can pass through. This is the ward. It is a hole cut in a metal plate inside the lock, and the key is the object that must pass through that hole. But it is more complex than a single wall, much more complex, because inside a well-made lock there are multiple wards, multiple plates, each with its own hole, stacked one after another like the layers of an onion. The key must pass through the first ward, then the second, then the third, each one testing a different part of the key's shape, each one rejecting any key that does not match perfectly. It is a maze, a three-dimensional labyrinth of negative space. And the key is the thread that must navigate that labyrinth without touching the walls. The locksmith turns now and looks at you. His eyes are grey, the color of the iron he works with. He nods once, a small acknowledgement, and then he reaches for a piece of metal on the shelf behind him. It is a flat sheet, iron, roughly 6 inches long and 4 inches wide, perhaps 3/16 of an inch thick. It is not finished. The edges are rough. The surface is dark with scale, the oxidation that forms when iron is heated and cooled. This is the raw material. This will become the lock plate. The body of the lock, the housing that will contain the wards, the bolt, the mechanism. He lays the plate on the bench. The metal makes a solid sound as it contacts the wood, a low thunk that you feel as much as hear. He reaches for a scribe, a tool like an awl with a sharpened point of hardened steel. He places the point against the surface of the iron and begins to drag it across, marking a line. The scribe makes a thin scratch in the metal, a bright silver line cutting through the dark scale. He is marking the position of the bolt hole, the opening through which the bolt will slide when the lock is turned. The line is straight, perfectly straight. He uses no ruler, no guide. His hand simply knows. Years of practice have trained his muscles to move in straight lines, to divide spaces evenly, to judge distances by eye with accuracy that would shame a mason's level. He makes another mark, and another, cross-hatching the surface with reference lines, each one serving a purpose, each one a guide for the work to come. Now he picks up a center punch. This is a small tool, a rod of steel perhaps 4 inches long, with one end ground to a point and the other end flat. He positions the point of the punch on one of the marks he has scribed. He holds it vertically, perfectly perpendicular to the surface of the iron. And then he picks up a small hammer with his other hand. The hammer rises, falls, strikes the flat end of the punch with a sharp tap. The point of the punch drives into the iron, creating a small dimple, a starting point, a location where a drill bit can begin its work without skating across the surface. He moves the punch, tap, another dimple, tap, another. He is marking the positions where holes will be drilled, where rivets will be driven, where the mechanism will be assembled. Each mark is precise, each one exactly where it needs to be. There is a rhythm to it. The tapping of the hammer, tap, 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 a steady beat, mechanical, hypnotic. The marks are made. The planning is complete. Now the work of shaping begins. He clamps the iron plate in the vise mounted on the edge of the bench. The vise is heavy. Forged iron jaws lined with softer brass to protect the work from being marred. He turns the handle, and the screw tightens, the jaws closing on the plate, holding it immobile. The plate stands vertical now, one edge projecting up from the vise like a steel fin. He selects a file from the rack. This is a large file, a flat file, perhaps 10 inches long, with coarse teeth cut into both faces. The teeth are angled, diagonal lines running across the surface of the file. These are cutting edges. Hundreds of tiny chisels, each one ready to shave away a small curl of metal. He grips the handle of the file in his right hand, places his left palm on the far end, and positions the file against the edge of the iron plate. And then he pushes. The file moves forward across the surface of the iron. The teeth bite, the metal resists, but the file is harder than the iron, much harder. Hardened steel against soft wrought iron. The teeth cut. They shear away tiny particles of metal, leaving bright scratches in their wake. The file makes a sound, a rasp, a mechanical grinding that fills the small room. Ah-rah-rah-rah-rasp. The file reaches the end of its stroke, and the locksmith lifts it away from the metal. He brings it back to the starting position and pushes again. Ah-rah-rah-rah-rasp. This is the work of filing. It is repetitive, methodical. The same motion over and over. Push the file forward, lift it away, return to the start, push forward again. Each stroke removes a tiny amount of metal, a few thousandths of an inch, no more. It would take 100 strokes to remove the thickness of a fingernail, 1,000 strokes to change the shape in any meaningful way. But the locksmith is patient. He has all the time in the world. Ah-rah-rah-rah-rasp, ah-rah-rah-rah-rasp, ah-rah-rah-rah-rasp. The rhythm is constant, never hurrying, never slowing, just the steady back and forth of the file across the iron. You watch his hands. They do not shake, they do not waver. The angle of the file remains constant. The pressure remains constant. This is the skill. This is the craft. Anyone can push a file across a piece of metal. But to do it consistently, stroke after stroke, maintaining the same angle and the same pressure, this requires practice. Years of practice. The edge of the plate begins to change. Where it was rough and irregular, it becomes smooth. The file creates a flat surface, straight and true. The locksmith pauses occasionally, running his thumb along the edge, feeling for imperfections. His fingertips are sensitive enough to detect variations of 1,000th of an inch. A high spot, a low spot, a slight wave in the surface. He feels them all, and he files them away. Ah-rah-rah-rah-rasp, ah-rah-rah-rah-rasp. There is something meditative about this work, the repetitive motion, the consistent sound. It is easy to lose yourself in it, to let your mind drift while your hands continue the task. The locksmith's face is calm, peaceful. This is where he belongs, at the bench, with the file in his hands, shaping iron, creating order from chaos. After perhaps 200 strokes, he stops. He loosens the vise and rotates the plate, clamping it again with a different edge facing up. He selects the same file and begins again. Ah-rah-rah-rah-rasp, ah-rah-rah-rah-rasp, working around the perimeter of the plate, smoothing each edge in turn, removing the rough scale, creating a clean, straight border. This is the foundation. Before the lock can be assembled, before the mechanism can be fitted, the basic structure must be perfect. The work continues, stroke after stroke, edge after edge. Time passes. In the world outside this room, the sun moves across the sky. Shadows shift. The light coming through the window changes angle, grows warmer, more golden. But inside the locksmith's workshop, time is measured differently. Not in hours, but in strokes. Not in minutes, but in the gradual transformation of raw iron into something refined. Eventually, the edges are finished. The locksmith releases the plate from the vise and holds it up to the light, examining it from different angles. He nods, satisfied. The plate is rectangular now, precisely rectangular. The corners are square. The edges are straight and smooth. It looks simple. It is simple, just a flat piece of iron. But that simplicity is deceptive, because achieving that simplicity required skill, required patience, required the steady accumulation of hundreds of small, precise actions. He sets the plate back on the bench. Now comes the drilling. He takes the plate to another part of the workshop, to a different bench where a bow drill stands mounted. This is a tool from ancient times, essentially unchanged for thousands of years. A vertical shaft of hardened steel held in a bearing at the top and pointed at the bottom. Around the shaft is wrapped a cord, and the cord is attached to a bow, like the bow of a violin but heavier, stronger. When the bow is moved back and forth, the cord causes the shaft to spin. And at the bottom of the shaft, fitted into a chuck, is the drill bit. The locksmith positions the iron plate beneath the drill bit, aligning one of the punch marks he made earlier with the point of the bit. He secures the plate with small clamps, ensuring it cannot move. Then he selects a drill bit from a wooden case. The bits are organized by size, from tiny points no thicker than a pin to larger bits as thick as a finger. He chooses a medium bit and fits it into the chuck, tightening it with a small key. He takes hold of the bow with both hands. The bow is perhaps 3 feet long, made from a springy piece of ash wood with the cord strung tight between the ends. He positions the bow so that the cord wraps once around the shaft of the drill, and then he begins to move the bow back and forth. The shaft spins, first one direction, then the other as the bow moves. The drill bit rotates, its cutting edges biting into the iron. The locksmith applies downward pressure on the top of the shaft, forcing the bit into the metal. The bit cuts, slowly. The iron resists, but the bit is harder. The bit is made of high-carbon steel, hardened in oil, sharp enough to cut through wrought iron as if it were hard cheese. There is a sound, a grinding sound, a squealing sound, metal cutting metal. The locksmith reaches for a small pot on the bench, dips his finger into it, and brings out a dollop of thick tallow, animal fat. He smears it on the surface of the iron around the drill bit. The tallow melts from the friction heat and flows into the cut, lubricating the bit, cooling it, helping it cut more smoothly. The sound changes, becomes quieter, more consistent. The bow moves back and forth, back and forth. The shaft spins, the bit cuts deeper. A curl of metal begins to emerge from the hole, a spiral ribbon of iron pushed up by the flutes of the drill bit. The locksmith maintains steady pressure, steady rhythm, back and forth, back and forth. It takes time to drill through iron. The bit must be sharp. The pressure must be constant. The speed must be right. Too fast, and the bit will overheat, lose its temper, become soft. Too slow, and it will not cut efficiently. The locksmith knows the right speed by sound, by feel, by the resistance he feels through the bow. The bit breaks through the far side of the plate. The resistance suddenly decreases. The locksmith eases up on the pressure, slows the bow, and stops. He releases the clamps and lifts the plate, examining the hole. It is clean, round, smooth. The edges are slightly raised from the displaced metal, but they will be filed away later. He repositions the plate, aligns the next punch mark, clamps it down, begins drilling again. Back and forth, back and forth. The steady rhythm of the bow, the high whine of steel cutting iron, the curl of metal emerging from the hole. Hole after hole, each one drilled with the same care, the same precision. The locksmith does not rush. Rushing creates mistakes. A drill bit that wanders off its mark, a hole that is not perpendicular, a bit that breaks, snapping off inside the metal and ruining hours of work. So he moves at the pace the work demands, steady, patient, methodical. The holes are completed. The locksmith returns to the first bench to the vise and clamps the plate once more. Now he must shape the wards. These are the barriers we spoke of earlier, the obstructions that will block any key except the correct one. They must be cut from the same piece of iron as the plate. They must be shaped with absolute precision. Because if a ward is too wide, even by a fraction, the correct key will not pass. And if a ward is too narrow, an incorrect key might fit. He takes a scribe and marks the outline of the first ward on the surface of the plate. It is a complex shape, not a simple circle or square, but an irregular form with straight sections and curved sections, indentations and protrusions. This shape has been designed specifically for this lock. No two locks will have the same ward pattern. Each is unique, a signature in iron. Now he selects a different tool, a cold chisel. This is a narrow blade of hardened steel, perhaps half an inch wide, with a cutting edge ground to a sharp bevel. He positions the edge of the chisel on one of the scribed lines and picks up a small hammer. The hammer falls, strikes the back of the chisel with a sharp ring. The cutting edge bites into the iron, removes a small chip. He moves the chisel, strikes again. Ring, another chip. Ring, ring, ring. This is cold working, shaping metal without heat. It is harder than hot forging. The iron is resistant, stubborn, but for precision work, cold is better. There is no scale to obscure the lines, no heat to cause warping, just the direct application of force. Chisel and hammer, ring, ring, ring. The sound is different from the filing, higher pitched, sharper. Each blow of the hammer creates a brief note that hangs in the air for a moment before fading. Ring, ring. The locksmith works around the outline of the ward, chiseling away the metal that will become the opening, the key-shaped hole through which the correct key will pass. The chiseling creates a rough opening. The edges are jagged, irregular. Now comes the filing again. The locksmith switches to a smaller file, a half-round file with one flat face and one curved face. He works the file into the opening, smoothing the edges, refining the shape. Ah-rah-rah-rah-rasp, ah-rah-rah-rah-rasp. The familiar sound returns, the steady rhythm. But this filing is different from the work on the edges of the plate. This filing requires more precision. The locksmith must maintain the exact shape he has scribed. He must remove metal evenly, keeping the curves smooth and the straight sections straight. He checks his work constantly, holding the plate up to the light, sighting along the edges, feeling with his fingertips for imperfections. The opening grows smoother. The rough chisel marks disappear. The ward begins to take its final form. This is patient work, careful work. The file rasps back and forth. The locksmith's breathing is steady, calm. He is not tired. This is not labor. This is art. When the first ward is complete, he begins on the second, and then the third, each one cut and filed with the same care, each one a unique shape. Together they form the maze, the puzzle, the combination of barriers that only one key will solve. Hours pass. The light through the window fades from gold to amber to dim gray. The locksmith lights a candle, placing it in a holder on the bench. The flame flickers slightly in the still air, casting moving shadows on the stone walls. But the work continues. The filing continues. Ah-rah-rah-rah-rasp, ah-rah-rah-rah-rasp. The sound is constant, soothing, like the sound of waves on a shore, or wind through trees. It fills the small room, fills your ears, becomes the entire world. The plate is nearly finished now. The wards are cut. The holes are drilled. The edges are smooth. The locksmith sets down his file and picks up a piece of fine sandstone. He begins to rub the surface of the plate with the stone, smoothing away the last file marks, polishing the iron to a dull sheen. The sandstone makes a softer sound than the file, a shushing sound. S-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H. S-H-H-H-H-H-H-H-H. Back and forth. The motion is hypnotic. Your eyelids grow heavy watching it. But we are not finished. The plate is only half of the lock. Now we must create the key. The locksmith reaches into a bucket near the forge and withdraws a rod of iron. It is perhaps 8 inches long and roughly the thickness of your little finger. This is a blank, raw material for a key. It has been forged by the blacksmith in the main workshop, drawn out from a larger piece of iron, hammered while red hot into a long, round rod, then allowed to cool. The surface is dark, covered in scale, but beneath that scale is clean iron, workable metal. The locksmith carries the rod to the small forge in the corner of his workshop. Yes, he has his own forge, not as large as the blacksmith's, just a small stone hearth, perhaps 2 feet square, with a pile of charcoal in the center and a bellows mounted to the side. But it is enough for the work he needs to do, enough to heat small pieces of iron, enough to soften metal for shaping. He uses a flint and steel to strike sparks into a small pile of tinder. The tinder catches, begins to smolder. He transfers the glowing tinder to the charcoal and works the bellows. The bellows wheeze, a rhythmic breathing, whoosh, whoosh. Air flows over the tinder. The flames spring up. The charcoal begins to glow, red at first, then orange. then the fierce yellow white of hot coal. He nestles the end of the iron rod into the heart of the coals, only the end, the last inch or so. This is the part that will become the bit, the business end of the key, the part that must navigate the wards. He works the bellows more. Whoosh, whoosh. The fire intensifies. The iron begins to glow, first a dull red, then brighter, cherry red, then orange. Metal changes when it is heated. It becomes soft, plastic, workable. At room temperature, iron is hard and strong. It resists deformation, but heat it enough and it transforms. The molecular structure remains the same, but the bonds between atoms loosen. The metal becomes malleable. You can shape it, bend it, flatten it. The end of the rod is orange now, the color of a sunset. The locksmith pulls it from the fire and carries it quickly to the anvil. This is not a large anvil, not the great mass of steel the blacksmith uses. Just a small stake anvil, perhaps 10 pounds, mounted securely to a heavy wooden block. But it is enough. He lays the glowing end of the rod on the flat face of the anvil and picks up a small hammer. The hammer is perhaps 8 ounces. The head is flat and smooth. He raises the hammer and brings it down on the hot iron. The hammer strikes with a sound, not the deep dong of the blacksmith's great hammer, but a higher note, a sharp tink. The hot iron flattens slightly, spreads. He strikes again. Tink, again. Tink, tink, tink. Each blow deforms the metal, compresses it, forces it to spread out sideways. The round rod becomes oval, then elliptical, then flat. The locksmith turns the rod slightly between blows, working the metal evenly, ensuring it spreads in the right directions. Tink, tink, tink. The metal cools as he works. The orange fades to red, the red darkens. The iron becomes less plastic, harder to shape. When the glow fades to a dull red, he returns the rod to the fire, nestles it back into the coals, works the bellows. Whoosh, whoosh. The metal heats again, back to orange. He pulls it out, returns to the anvil. Tink, tink, tink. This is the cycle of forging. Heat and hammer, gradually transforming the shape of the metal. It requires patience. Each heating can only change the metal so much before it cools, so you work in stages. Heat, hammer, slowly approaching the desired form. The end of the rod is becoming a blade, a flat paddle of iron perhaps an inch wide and 2 inches long. This is the bit of the key, the part that will carry the cuts, the notches, the negative spaces that will allow it to pass through the wards. But before those cuts can be made, the bit must be the right size, the right thickness, the right width. The locksmith continues to hammer. The tink-tink-tink sound fills the workshop. It is a bright sound, cheerful almost, very different from the rasp of the file or the ring of the chisel. This is the sound of creation, of transformation, of metal becoming something new. After perhaps a dozen heating cycles, the bit is the right size. The locksmith plunges it into a bucket of water. There is a violent hiss, a cloud of steam. The water boils where the hot iron touches it, but the iron cools rapidly. In a few seconds it is cold enough to touch. He pulls it from the water and examines it. The bit is flat, roughly rectangular. The edges are slightly irregular from the hammering, but that is fine. They will be filed smooth. What matters is that the basic shape is right. The thickness is right. Now comes the most delicate part of the entire process, the part that separates a locksmith from a blacksmith, the part that requires not just skill, but understanding, vision, the ability to see in 3 dimensions, to imagine negative space, to think in terms of what is not there rather than what is. He must cut the key. The locksmith clamps the key blank in the vise. The shaft of the key is held securely. The bit projects upward. He sets the finished lock plate beside the vise where he can see it. Reference. The wards in the plate tell him what must be cut from the key. Each ward is an obstruction, a barrier. The key must have corresponding gaps, cutouts, slots, so that when the key enters the lock, The bit can pass through the wards without touching them. He studies the pattern of the wards, 3 wards, each one a different shape, each one positioned at a slightly different height on the plate. The key must be cut to pass all 3 simultaneously. This requires visualization, mental geometry. He must imagine the key sliding into the lock, must picture each ward and how the key will interact with it, must determine exactly where on the key each cutout must be, how deep it must be, how wide. This is not a process that can be rushed. This is not a process where mistakes can be easily corrected. Because if he cuts too much, if he removes too much metal, the key will pass through the wards but will not engage the bolt. It will turn freely without moving the mechanism. And if he cuts too little, the key will jam in the lock, will not enter at all, or will enter partway and then stick. There is a narrow margin of error, a few thousandths of an inch in some cases. The locksmith picks up a scribe and begins to mark the bit. He measures the position of the first ward on the plate, transfers that measurement to the key, makes a small scratch, a reference line. Then the second ward, another mark, the third ward, another mark. Now he knows where the cuts must be, but not how deep, not the exact shape. For this, he must test. He selects a needle file from the rack. This is a small file, very small. The cutting surface is perhaps 3 inches long and no thicker than a matchstick. It is a 3-square file. The cross-section is triangular. This shape allows it to cut fine slots, narrow grooves, precise negative spaces. He positions the edge of the file at the first mark on the key, and he begins to file. Rasp, rasp, rasp. The sound is much quieter than the larger file, almost delicate. The file is removing only a tiny amount of metal with each stroke, a few 10,000ths of an inch. The groove it creates is shallow, barely visible at first. Rasp, rasp, rasp. The locksmith's hand moves in a short, controlled stroke, perhaps 2 inches of travel, back and forth, back and forth. The file cuts a little deeper. The groove becomes more pronounced. After perhaps 50 strokes, he stops, sets down the file, picks up the key, picks up the lock plate, and attempts to insert the key into the lock. The bit slides toward the first ward, touches it. The metal makes contact with metal. The key cannot proceed. It is blocked. The locksmith nods. This is expected. He has barely begun to cut. He returns the key to the vise, picks up the needle file. Rasp, rasp, rasp. 50 more strokes. Test again. This time the key slides a bit further. The groove he has filed is deep enough to clear part of the first ward, but not all of it. The key jams partway through. He files more. Rasp, rasp, tests, jams, files, rasp, rasp, tests. This is the art of the locksmith, this testing and filing, testing and filing. It is impossible to cut the key perfectly on the first attempt. The locksmith must work gradually, removing a little metal, testing, removing a little more, always approaching the correct cut, never quite there until suddenly he is. After perhaps 200 strokes, the key slides through the first ward. The groove he has filed is now the right depth and the right width. The bit passes the first barrier, but now it encounters the second ward, stops, jams. The locksmith returns to the vise, begins filing the second notch. Rasp, rasp, rasp. The sound is constant, meditative. The rhythm never changes. Each stroke is the same length, the same speed, the same pressure. This consistency is crucial because the file is cutting metal, and metal is hard. If you press too hard, the file will skip, will chatter, will create an uneven cut. If you press too lightly, the teeth will not engage, will not cut at all. The pressure must be just right. And the locksmith's hands know that pressure, have known it for so many years that it is automatic, unconscious. His muscles have memorized the exact force required. Rasp, rasp, rasp. The second groove grows deeper. The locksmith tests. The key passes the first ward, catches on the second. He files more. Rasp, rasp, tests, still catches. Files, rasp, rasp, tests, closer. Time becomes irrelevant. There is only the file and the metal, the sound and the feel, the gradual transformation of an obstruction into a passage. The candle on the workbench burns lower. The flame flickers. Wax drips down the side and pools at the base. Outside the locked door, the world continues. People go about their lives. But in here, in this small stone room, there is only the work. The key passes the second ward, touches the third, jams. The locksmith files the third notch. Rasp, rasp, rasp. The third ward is the most complex. Its shape is irregular. The cut in the key must match that irregularity exactly. This requires more strokes, more testing, more adjustment. He files, tests, examines the marks on the key where the metal has made contact, files again in those specific spots. Rasp, rasp, tests. The key slides deeper, almost through, almost, but not quite. There is a tiny point of contact, a high spot on the key that corresponds to a low spot in the ward. The locksmith can feel it, can sense the exact location through the resistance. He knows where to file. Rasp, rasp, just a few strokes. A few more slivers of metal removed. Test. The key slides through, all the way through, all three wards. The bit emerges from the far side of the plate. The locksmith rotates the key slightly. There is resistance, friction, but the key turns. And as it turns, if the bolt were installed, it would slide. The lock would open. But the fit is not perfect, not yet. The key passes through the wards, yes, but there is too much friction, too much resistance. The locksmith can feel it, can feel where the metal of the key is rubbing against the metal of the wards. These are high spots, places where the tolerances are too tight. The key will work, but it will be difficult to turn. It will wear. The wards will wear. Over time, the lock will become loose, sloppy. This is not acceptable. So he files more. But now he is not filing to allow the key to pass. He is filing to perfect the fit, to create the proper clearance. He must remove metal from the key in the exact spots where it is rubbing, not too much, just enough. A few 10,000ths of an inch. This is the finest work of all. This is where experience matters most, because there is no visible guide, no scribed line to follow. The locksmith must work by feel, by the subtle feedback transmitted through the key to his hands. He files a few strokes. Rasp, rasp, tests, feels the resistance. Files a few more strokes in a slightly different location. Rasp, tests, the resistance is less. Better, he continues. Rasp, rasp, test, rasp, rasp, test. The key begins to turn smoothly. The friction decreases. The resistance fades. The locksmith works in smaller and smaller increments now, just 3 or 4 strokes of the file. Then test. 2 strokes. Test. 1 stroke. Test. He is approaching perfection. Asymptotically, never quite reaching it, but getting closer with each adjustment. Finally, he is satisfied. The key slides into the lock with just the slightest resistance, just enough to know it is there. That metal is passing through metal, but not so much that force is required. The key turns smoothly, easily. There is a quiet sliding sound as the bit rotates within the wards, and there is a feeling, a rightness, the sense that everything is aligned, that every surface is exactly where it should be. The locksmith withdraws the key, examines it in the candlelight. The bit is no longer a simple flat paddle. It is now a complex shape, a pattern of slots and protrusions, negative and positive space. It looks almost random, almost arbitrary, but it is not. Every cut has a purpose. Every notch corresponds to a ward. This key will open this lock and no other. And any other key, no matter how similar it might appear, will fail. This is the fundamental principle of the lock: uniqueness, security through specificity. The lock is a test, a challenge, and the key is the one correct answer to that challenge. To create a lock is to create a question to which only you know the answer. To create a key is to encode that answer in iron. The locksmith sets the key on the bench beside the lock plate. They belong together. They are matched. A pair. One cannot function without the other. The lock is useless without its key. The key is meaningless without its lock. Together they form a complete system, a guardian, a protector of secrets. But the work is not quite finished. The key is cut, the plate is shaped, but both are rough. The surfaces are marked by files, scratched, imperfect. They must be refined, smoothed, made beautiful as well as functional. The locksmith picks up a fine file, a smooth file with very fine teeth, hundreds of teeth per inch. This file does not remove much metal, it polishes, it refines. He draws the file lightly across the surface of the key. The sound is softer now, almost a whisper. S-H-H-H-H-H-H-H. S-H-H-H-H-H-H-H. The file strokes are gentle, barely touching, just enough pressure to engage the teeth, to remove the microscopic ridges left by the coarser files. He works over the entire surface of the key, the shaft, the bit, every face, every edge. The file whispers across the iron. S-H-H-H-H-H-H-H. S-H-H-H-H-H-H-H. The scratches fade. The surface becomes smoother, begins to develop a slight sheen. Then he switches to the sandstone, the same piece he used on the lock plate. He rubs the key with the stone. Circular motions, small circles. The stone abrades the surface, smooths it further. The iron begins to glow, a soft grey sheen. The stone makes a gentle shushing sound. S-H-H-H-H. S-H-H-H-H. Round and round. After the stone comes the leather, a piece of old belt, thick cowhide. The locksmith sprinkles a small amount of fine ash on the leather, wood ash from the forge. The ash contains tiny particles of silica, abrasive particles. He rubs the key against the leather, back and forth. The leather flexes, conforms to the shape of the key. The ash cuts away the last microscopic imperfections, and the leather polishes, burnishes, brings up a shine. The key gleams in the candlelight. It is beautiful, simple, elegant, the product of hours of work, of patience and skill, of understanding and precision. It started as a rough rod of iron. Now it is a tool, an instrument, a solution to a puzzle. The locksmith applies the same treatment to the lock plate. Fine file, sandstone, leather and ash. The surface becomes smooth, refined. The wards are no longer rough cuts. They are precise openings, clean, sharp. The entire plate has a finished quality, a completeness. He oils both pieces, dipping a rag in the pot of fine oil and wiping it across the surfaces. The oil prevents rust, protects the iron from moisture, and it makes the mechanism slide more smoothly, the key moving through the wards, the bolt sliding in its channel. Oil is essential. The difference between a lock that works smoothly for years and one that seizes after a few months. The oil soaks into the iron, darkens it slightly, gives it depth. The locksmith wipes away the excess with a clean rag. Now the surfaces are smooth and protected, ready for use. He assembles the lock. This lock is simple, a plate lock. The mechanism consists of the plate we have watched him make, a bolt that slides back and forth, and a spring to return the bolt to the locked position. He takes a long, flat piece of iron. This is the bolt. It has been forged separately. It has a slot cut in it where the key will engage. He slides the bolt through the opening in the plate. It moves smoothly. The clearances are right. He attaches the spring, a piece of tempered steel bent into a curve. One end is fixed to the plate with a rivet. The other end presses against the bolt. The spring wants to push the bolt forward, into the locked position. When the key turns, it must overcome this spring pressure, must push the bolt back. And when the key is withdrawn, the spring returns the bolt forward. The lock re-engages automatically. The locksmith tests the assembly. He inserts the key, turns it. The bolt slides back. Smoothly, easily, he releases the key. The spring pushes the bolt forward. The lock engages. He repeats the action. Insert, turn, release. Insert, turn, release. Each time the mechanism works perfectly, smoothly, no binding, no hesitation. Just the clean mechanical action of precisely fitted parts moving as they were designed to move. There is a satisfaction in this. A deep satisfaction, the satisfaction of creation, of taking raw materials and transforming them into something functional, something useful, something that will serve a purpose. This lock will be installed on a door, a chest, a strongbox. It will protect something valuable, and it will work day after day, year after year, because it was made correctly, because every step was done with care, with precision, with skill. The locksmith holds the finished lock in his hand, feels the weight of it, the solidity. This is good iron, good work. He turns the key one more time, listening to the quiet sound of the mechanism, the whisper of metal on metal, the soft click as the bolt reaches the end of its travel. This sound. This is the sound of security, of safety, of a job well done. He sets the lock on the shelf with the others, each one unique, each one a puzzle, each one a testament to the locksmith's craft, and beside it he hangs the key on one of the pegs driven into the overhead beam. The key dangles, turns slightly in the still air, catches the candlelight, gleams. The work for today is complete. The locksmith cleans his tools, wipes the files with an oily rag, returns each one to its place in the rack, wipes down the workbench, sweeps the metal filings from the floor into a container. They will be saved, melted down, reused. Nothing is wasted in this workshop. He extinguishes the candle with a wet thumb and forefinger, the brief hiss as the flame dies. The workshop falls into darkness, just the faint light from the window. The moon is rising, pale light, silver. It illuminates the lock on the shelf, the key hanging from its peg, both casting small shadows on the stone wall. The locksmith moves to the door, the only door, the locked door. He reaches for his own key, the master key that opens this lock that guards his workshop, his tools, his knowledge. He inserts the key, turns it. There is a solid click as the bolt slides back, the sound we have been building toward, the sound that means the barrier is opening, the guardian is satisfied. The correct answer has been given to the challenge. He pulls the door open and steps out into the main forge. The heat from the blacksmith's fire washes over him, the smell of coal and hot iron, the bright yellow glow of the forge, the ringing of hammers on anvils, the busy chaos of the blacksmith's world, so different from the quiet precision of the locksmith's chamber. But the locksmith does not join the blacksmiths, does not pick up a heavy hammer. He simply nods to them, a brief acknowledgement. And then he turns back to the door, his door. He pulls it closed, locks it once more with his key. The bolt slides home. Click. The workshop is sealed. The secrets are kept. And inside, in the darkness, the new lock sits on its shelf, waiting, ready to be installed, ready to serve its purpose, ready to guard whatever treasure or secret it will be assigned to protect. It is just a simple mechanism, just iron and spring. But it is also more than that. It is the product of human ingenuity, the application of skill and knowledge, the transformation of raw material into something greater. This is the work of the medieval locksmith. This is the craft, not the drama of the blacksmith pounding out horseshoes in showers of sparks, but the quiet, patient, precise work of creating complexity from simplicity, of cutting invisible mazes into metal, of encoding questions and answers in iron, of building the guardians that protect our secrets. And now, as the moon rises higher and the workshop sits locked and dark, the story of this lock is complete. From rough iron to finished mechanism, from concept to reality, every stroke of the file, every tap of the hammer, every test and adjustment, all leading to this moment, the click of the lock engaging, the sound of security, the sound that lets us rest, that lets us sleep, knowing that our treasures are protected, that our secrets are safe, that somewhere in a small stone workshop, a craftsman has done his work well, has created a guardian that will not fail, a lock that only the correct key will open. And as you lie there, comfortable and warm, you can hear it, the rasp of the file on iron. Rasp, 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 the sound fading now, becoming distant, the workshop receding, the locksmith's chamber growing dim. But the sound remains, the steady rhythm, the patient work, rasp, 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 growing quieter, softer, rasp, 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 until there is only silence and sleep, and the knowledge that somewhere a lock is doing its job, a key is waiting, and a craftsman's work endures. The bolt is the guardian's arm, the muscle, the physical barrier that stands between security and intrusion. Without the bolt, a lock is merely decoration, a puzzle without consequence. The bolt is consequence made manifest in iron. It begins as a bar, a simple rectangular bar of wrought iron, perhaps 8 inches long, an inch wide, and 3/8 of an inch thick. Heavy, solid. When you lift it, you feel the weight. This is real metal, not the delicate shavings and filings of the key, but substantial mass. This piece of iron could be a weapon, could be a tool, could be a dozen things, but the locksmith has chosen to make it a bolt, a barrier, a wall that slides. The bar sits on the workbench, cold and dark. The surface is rough, textured with the hammer marks from its forging. The blacksmith made this bar days ago, heating a larger piece of iron to orange heat and drawing it out under the power hammer, stretching the metal, compressing it, aligning the grain, making it dense, strong. Then he cut it to length and set it aside for the locksmith, because the blacksmith makes blanks, rough forms, but the locksmith makes precision. The locksmith picks up the bolt bar and examines it, sights along its length, checking for straightness. A bolt must be straight, perfectly straight, because it will slide through a channel, and any curve, any bend will cause it to bind, will cause friction, will make the lock difficult to operate. He holds the bar up to the light from the window, one eye closed, looking down the length as a carpenter might sight along a board. The edge is true, straight, good. But the surfaces are rough. He can feel it with his fingers. The hammer marks create tiny peaks and valleys across the iron. These must be removed. The bolt must be smooth, must slide easily through its channel, must not catch or snag. He clamps the bolt in the vise, the iron jaws close on it, secure. He selects a flat file from the rack, a bastard file, coarse teeth, good for removing material quickly. He positions the file against the face of the bolt and begins to stroke. Rasp, the familiar sound, the sound we know. The file cuts across the iron, its teeth shaving away the high spots. Rasp. The stroke is long, from one end of the bolt to the other. 8 inches of travel. The locksmith's arm extends, returns, extends again. Rasp. This is roughing work, removing the obvious imperfections. The file takes large bites. You can see the bright scratches it leaves in its wake. Silver lines across the dark iron, evidence of metal removed, of surface transformed. Rasp, rasp. The rhythm establishes itself. The locksmith's breathing synchronizes with the strokes. Breathe in as the file returns. Breathe out as it cuts. Rasp. The body and the work become one. No wasted motion, no unnecessary tension, just the steady application of force. The file cutting, the iron yielding. The first face is flattened. The locksmith loosens the vise, rotates the bolt 90 degrees, clamps it again, selects the same file, rasp, working the second face now, the same strokes, the same rhythm. The file whispers its rough song across the metal. Face after face, 4 faces in all, each one filed flat, each one smoothed. The work takes time, perhaps an hour, perhaps more. Time is measured in strokes, in the accumulation of small changes. The pile of iron filings on the bench grows, tiny curls of metal, the evidence of transformation. When the rough filing is complete, the locksmith switches to a smoother file. A second cut file, finer teeth. This file removes the scratches left by the first file, creates its own scratches, yes, but smaller ones, less visible. The sound changes slightly, still a rasp, but higher pitched, a different texture to the grinding. Rasp, rasp. The strokes continue. The bolt becomes smoother, the surface more refined. Light reflects from it differently now, not the dull absorption of rough iron, but a subtle sheen, the beginning of polish. Then a smooth file, even finer teeth. The sound becomes quieter, almost gentle. Shhhh rasp, shhhh rasp. The file is polishing now more than cutting, removing microscopic imperfections, creating a surface that will slide with minimal friction. Finally, the sandstone. The locksmith releases the bolt from the vise and holds it in his hand. He rubs the stone along the length of the bolt, long strokes. The stone makes its soft shushing sound. Shhhhhhh, shhhhhhh. The iron grows smoother still. The surface becomes almost silky. If you were to run your finger along it, it would glide. No catching, no resistance. But the bolt is not yet complete. It is smooth, yes. Straight, yes. But it is still just a bar. It must be shaped, must be given the features that allow it to function as part of the lock mechanism. The locksmith marks the bolt with his scribe, a line across the width, about 2 inches from one end. This marks where the slot will be cut, the slot where the key will engage, where the rotating motion of the key will be translated into the linear motion of the bolt. This is the connection point, the interface between the key and the lock. He clamps the bolt in the vise once more. The marked line is positioned just above the jaws, accessible. He selects a hacksaw from the tool rack. This is a frame saw with a thin blade under tension. The blade is perhaps 10 inches long and narrow. The teeth are fine, designed for cutting metal. The locksmith positions the blade on the marked line and begins to saw. The blade moves back and forth, short strokes. The teeth bite into the iron. There is a sound, a high-pitched scraping. Scree, scree. The blade cuts slowly. Iron is hard. The saw must work for every fraction of an inch. Scree, scree. The stroke is repetitive, mechanical, back and forth, back and forth. The locksmith maintains a steady rhythm, not too fast, not too slow. The blade must stay aligned, must cut straight down. Any deviation will create a crooked slot, and a crooked slot will not engage the key properly. Scree, scree. The cut deepens. A thin line appears in the surface of the bolt. The blade is perhaps half an inch into the iron now. The locksmith pauses, touches the blade. It is warm. Friction generates heat. He dips the blade in oil. The oil cools it, lubricates the cut, makes the sawing easier. He continues, scree, scree. The cut grows deeper, 3/4 of an inch now. The blade has nearly cut through the thickness of the bolt, but not quite. The last bit is the most delicate. If he presses too hard, the blade might bind, might snap, so he eases up on the pressure. Lighter strokes, scree, scree. The blade breaks through. The cut is complete. A slot now runs across the width of the bolt, perhaps 3/4 of an inch deep and as wide as the saw blade. Maybe a 1/16 of an inch. Narrow, but wide enough for the bit of the key to enter. The locksmith removes the bolt from the vise, examines the slot. The cut is clean, straight. The walls of the slot are parallel. Good. He takes a small file, a knife file, thin and tapered. He works this file inside the slot, smoothing the walls, removing any burrs left by the saw. The file makes a quiet rasping sound inside the narrow channel, a confined sound, muffled. When the slot is smooth, he marks the bolt again, this time near the other end. Here he will drill holes, holes for the rivets that will attach the bolt to the spring that will hold it in position. That will provide the resistance when the key turns. To the bow drill, the bolt clamped beneath the bit, the bow moving back and forth, the bit spinning, cutting, the familiar process, the familiar sound, the high whine of steel cutting iron, curl after curl of metal emerging from the growing hole, the tallow melting, lubricating, cooling. 2 holes, one near each edge of the bolt, small holes, just large enough for the rivets, drilled straight through. The bit breaks through the far side with a sudden release of resistance. Then the second hole, the same process, the same careful control. The bolt is nearly complete now. It has been smoothed, shaped, slotted, drilled. It is ready to be integrated into the lock. But first it must have its channel, the groove in which it will slide. The locksmith returns to the lock plate, the plate we watched him create in part 1. The plate with its intricate wards, its carefully filed openings. Now he must add the bolt channel, a long groove milled into the surface of the plate, a track along which the bolt will travel. He clamps the plate to the workbench, flat, secure. He marks the position of the channel with his scribe, a rectangle 8 inches long, just wider than the bolt. This channel must be cut into the surface of the plate, not through it, just a shallow groove, perhaps a 1/16 of an inch deep, enough to guide the bolt, to keep it aligned as it slides. This is delicate work. The channel must be perfectly straight, must be uniform in depth. The locksmith selects a chisel, a wide chisel, 1/2 inch across. He positions the cutting edge at one end of the marked rectangle, taps it with a hammer. The chisel bites into the iron, removes a small chip. He moves the chisel forward slightly, taps again. Another chip. This is painstaking work, chip by chip. Moving along the length of the channel, the chisel creates a rough groove, uneven, irregular, but the basic material is being removed. The channel is being excavated. Tap, 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 the hammer strikes, the chisel cuts, the chips fall away. Small flakes of iron collecting on the bench. Tap, tap, the sound is rhythmic, precise, each tap controlled, each one removing just the right amount of material. When the rough chiseling is complete, the locksmith switches to a file, a half-round file. The curved face fits into the channel. He draws the file along the length of the groove. Rasp. The file smooths the bottom, evens out the depth. Rasp. Back and forth. The channel becomes more uniform, more regular. He tests the fit, lays the bolt in the channel. It sits snugly. Good. He removes the bolt, files a bit more just to ensure smoothness, to eliminate any potential friction points. Rasp, rasp, test again. The bolt slides in the channel, moves freely. The fit is right. Now he must grease the channel. The locksmith has a small pot of grease on his workbench. This is not common grease, not the thick tallow used for general lubrication. This is fine grease, made from rendered sheep fat mixed with beeswax. The wax gives it body, makes it stick to the metal, makes it last. He dips a rag into the grease and wipes it along the channel. A thin film, just enough to coat the surface. Too much grease will collect dirt, will become gummy, but the right amount will allow the bolt to slide smoothly for years, decades even. The grease soaks into the microscopic pores of the iron, creates a barrier between the bolt and the plate, reduces friction, reduces wear. The bolt is laid in the grease channel. It slides back and forth easily, smoothly. The locksmith nods. This is good. The bolt is ready, but it is inert. It has no force, no energy. It will slide when pushed, yes, but it will not return on its own. It needs a spring. The spring is the heart of the lock, the source of its power. Without the spring, the lock is passive. The bolt can be pushed open and will stay open, pushed closed and will stay closed. There is no automatic return, no self-engagement. The spring changes everything. The spring gives the lock its will, its determination to remain locked. Creating a spring is one of the most challenging tasks in metalwork. A spring must be flexible, must bend without breaking, must return to its original shape after being compressed or extended. This requires metal with specific properties. Metal that is hard enough to resist permanent deformation, but not so hard that it becomes brittle. This balance is achieved through tempering. The locksmith selects a piece of steel for the spring, not iron, steel. Steel is iron with carbon added. The carbon changes the properties of the metal, makes it capable of being hardened, of being tempered. Pure iron cannot be properly hardened. It remains relatively soft no matter how you treat it. But steel can be transformed. The spring blank is a flat strip of steel, perhaps 6 inches long, an inch wide, an eighth of an inch thick. It has been forged by a specialist, a spring maker who understands the nuances of steel, who knows which stock contains the right amount of carbon. The locksmith purchases spring blanks from this craftsman, trusts his expertise. But the spring must be shaped, must be bent to the correct curve. The curve that will provide the right amount of pressure against the bolt. Too much pressure and the lock will be difficult to turn. Too little and the bolt will not return fully. The spring must be calibrated. The locksmith heats the spring blank in his small forge, nestles it into the coals, works the bellows, whoosh, whoosh. The steel begins to glow, red at first, then cherry red, then orange. At this temperature, the steel is malleable, can be bent without cracking. He pulls it from the fire and quickly carries it to a bending jig. This is a simple tool, just a heavy block of iron with pins driven into it at specific positions. The pins create a form, a curved shape. The locksmith lays the hot steel across the pins and presses down. The steel bends, conforms to the curve defined by the pins. He holds the pressure for a moment, then releases. The steel springs back slightly. This is expected. The metal has memory, wants to return to its original flat shape, but it has been permanently deformed, has taken a curve. Not as much curve as the jig imposed, but enough. The locksmith examines the curve, not quite right. He reheats the steel, bends it again. The curve increases. He repeats this process several times. Heat, bend, cool, check. Heat, bend, cool, check. Gradually, the spring approaches the desired shape. When the curve is correct, the spring must be hardened. This is the critical step, the step that transforms soft steel into spring steel. The process is simple in concept but demanding in execution. The steel must be heated to a specific temperature, not too hot, not too cool, then it must be rapidly cooled, quenched. The rapid cooling locks the internal structure of the steel in a hard, stressed state. The metal becomes glass-like, extremely hard, but also extremely brittle. The locksmith heats the spring in the forge. He watches the color carefully. The steel glows red, then brighter, orange, then a lighter orange. The color is crucial. Too hot and the steel will become coarse-grained, weak. Too cool and it will not harden properly. The correct color is a medium orange, the color of a flame, of sunset. When the color is right, he pulls the spring from the fire, moves quickly to the quenching bucket. This bucket contains oil, not water. Water cools too rapidly, creates too much stress, can cause the steel to crack. Oil cools more slowly, more evenly. The locksmith plunges the glowing spring into the oil. There is a violent reaction. The oil at the surface of the spring instantly vaporizes, creates a layer of vapor. The spring hisses, a loud, angry hiss. HSSSSSSSSSS. The sound fills the workshop. Smoke rises from the bucket, the smell of hot oil, acrid, sharp. The spring darkens, the glow fades, red to black in seconds. The hissing continues. HSSSSSSS, the oil bubbles, roils. The locksmith holds the spring submerged, moves it gently back and forth, ensuring even cooling. No hot spots, no cold spots, just uniform, rapid cooling throughout the entire piece. After perhaps 30 seconds, the hissing diminishes. The oil calms. The spring is cool enough to touch. The locksmith withdraws it, wipes off the excess oil, examines it. The spring is now hard, extremely hard. He tests this by trying to file it. The file skates across the surface, does not bite, does not cut. The steel is harder than the file. This is good. This is what hardening achieves. But this hardness comes at a price. The spring is now brittle. If you were to try to bend it, it would snap, shatter like glass. This is not acceptable. A spring must flex. So the spring must be tempered, not to be confused with the tempering we just performed. That was hardening. This is tempering. Confusing terminology, but precise. Tempering is the process of slightly softening the hardened steel, reducing the brittleness, allowing the metal to flex without breaking. The locksmith cleans the surface of the spring with fine sandstone, removes all the oil, all the scale, polishes the steel until it is bright, mirror bright. This is necessary because he must watch the color. When steel is heated after hardening, it develops colors. Oxide layers that form on the surface. These colors appear in a predictable sequence and indicate the temperature of the metal. He places the spring on a block of iron near the forge. Not in the forge, near it, where the heat radiates but does not directly touch. He watches. The spring begins to warm. At first, nothing visible happens. The steel remains bright. Then, gradually, a pale yellow color appears. A straw yellow. This is the first tempering color. The locksmith watches. The yellow deepens, becomes richer, darker. Then it shifts. A hint of orange creeps in. The color transitions from straw to gold to orange. He watches carefully. The color must reach a specific shade. For a spring, the correct color is blue, a light blue, the blue of a summer sky. The colors continue to change. Orange deepens, brown appears, then purple. Then the purple begins to shift, violet, and then finally blue. A pale blue spreads across the surface of the spring. The locksmith immediately picks up the spring with tongs and plunges it into water. Not all this time. Water. The rapid cooling stops the tempering process, locks in the properties at this exact stage. The spring hisses again. Steam rises. SSSSSSSS. The blue color remains on the surface, evidence of the tempering. The steel is now properly tempered, hard enough to maintain its shape under load, soft enough to flex without breaking. This is spring steel. This is the heart of the lock. The locksmith tests the spring, bends it between his fingers. It flexes, returns to its original shape. Good. He bends it further. Still it returns. Excellent. The temper is correct. The spring will work. Now he must attach the spring to the bolt. He positions the spring along the length of the bolt. The curved portion of the spring will press against a fixed point on the lock plate. The straight end will be riveted to the bolt. When the bolt slides, the spring will compress. And when the bolt is released, the spring will push it back. He marks the positions on the spring where it will be drilled to match the holes already in the bolt, places the spring in the vise, uses the bow drill. The bit cuts through the tempered steel, slower than it cut through iron. The steel is harder. The bit must work harder, but it cuts. Whine, whine, the high-pitched whine of steel cutting steel. The holes are drilled. The spring is aligned with the bolt. The locksmith inserts small iron rivets through the holes. Rivets are simple fasteners, a shaft with a head on one end. The shaft passes through the holes in both the spring and the bolt. Then the end of the shaft is hammered flat, spread out, creating a second head on the far side. The rivet cannot come out. It locks the two pieces together. The locksmith places the assembly on the anvil. The head of the first rivet rests on the flat face of the anvil. The tail of the rivet projects upward. He positions a small ball-peen hammer over the tail and taps. Tink, the tail begins to flatten. Tink, it spreads. Tink, the metal mushrooms out, creating a dome, a second head. Tink, tink, tink. The tapping continues until the second head is fully formed, solid, tight against the spring. The second rivet receives the same treatment. Tink, 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 the rhythmic tapping, the metal spreading, the connections solidifying. The bolt and spring are now one unit. The locksmith tests it, presses on the curved part of the spring compresses. When he releases, it snaps back. The force is transmitted to the bolt. If the bolt were free to move, the spring would push it. This is the power source. the engine of the lock. Now comes the assembly, the moment when all the individual components become a unified mechanism, when chaos becomes order, when pieces become purpose. The locksmith lays out all the components on his workbench. The lock plate with its wards and bolt channel, the bolt with its attached spring, the casing. The casing is a shallow iron box that will enclose the mechanism, protect it from dirt and damage. The casing has been formed from sheet iron, shaped and filed and fitted. He begins with the plate. This is the foundation. Everything else builds on it. He positions the bolt in its channel. The spring curves away from the bolt, searching for its attachment point. The casing has a mounting point for the spring, a small projection, a pin. The locksmith positions the curved end of the spring over this pin. The spring resists, wants to straighten. He must compress it slightly to get it in position. He presses. The spring flexes. The end slips over the pin, and suddenly the bolt is under tension. The spring is compressed. It is pushing the bolt forward in its channel, trying to extend. The locksmith holds the bolt back, prevents it from sliding forward. He positions the casing over the lock plate. The two pieces must align perfectly. He has drilled holes around the perimeter of both pieces, matching holes. These will receive the rivets that will permanently join the casing to the plate. But before riveting, he must ensure everything functions correctly. This is a test assembly. He inserts a few temporary pins through the holes just to hold the casing in place, to keep the components aligned. Now he releases the bolt. The spring pushes it forward. The bolt slides smoothly in its greased channel, moves perhaps 2 inches, then stops. It has reached the end of its travel. The end of the bolt now projects beyond the edge of the lock plate. This is the locked position, the bolt extended, blocking the door or chest or gate. The locksmith picks up the key we watched him create in part 1, the key with its carefully filed notches, its precise negative spaces. He inserts the key into the lock. The bit of the key slides toward the wards, passes through the first ward, smooth, through the second ward, through the third. The key is fully inserted. Now he rotates the key. The bit turns, and as it turns, the bit engages the slot in the bolt. The slot we watched him saw and file. The edges of the slot press against the edges of the bit. The rotational motion of the key is converted to linear motion of the bolt. The bolt is forced backward, against the pressure of the spring. The spring compresses. The bolt slides back, retracts into the lock body. The end of the bolt withdraws from its extended position, pulls flush with the edge of the lock plate. The bolt is now retracted. The lock is open. The locksmith releases the key, allows it to rotate back, and the spring immediately asserts itself, pushes the bolt forward again. The bolt extends. The lock re-engages, all on its own, automatically. This is the magic of the spring. The lock wants to be locked. He cycles the mechanism several times. Insert key, turn, bolt retracts, release key, bolt extends. Insert, turn, retract, release, extend. Each time the motion is smooth, consistent. The grease in the channel allows the bolt to slide without resistance. The spring provides firm but not excessive pressure. The mechanism works. But this is just a test. The locksmith removes the temporary pins, takes the assembly apart, because now he must rivet it permanently. Once the rivets are set, the lock cannot be disassembled, cannot be opened. The mechanism will be sealed inside, protected, secure. He applies more grease to the bolt channel, ensures every surface is properly lubricated. Then he reassembles, positions the bolt, compresses the spring, places the casing. This time he inserts actual rivets, small iron rivets all around the perimeter, perhaps 12 in total. One by one he sets each rivet. The process is the same for each. Position the rivet. Ensure the lock body is supported on the anvil. Tap the tail of the rivet with the ball-peen hammer. Tink, tink, tink. The tail spreads, forms a head, locks the casing to the plate. Rivet by rivet, tink, tink, tink. The sound circles the perimeter of the lock. Each rivet binds the assembly more tightly, more permanently. After the first few rivets, the casing cannot be removed. After all 12, the lock is a single solid unit, sealed, complete. The locksmith examines the finished lock, turns it over in his hands, feels the weight, the solidity. This is a real lock, a functioning mechanism. He inserts the key once more. The key slides in, smooth as silk. The wards have not shifted during assembly. The clearances are still correct. He turns the key. The bolt retracts. The motion is effortless. Perfect. He withdraws the key and listens. There is a soft sound, a quiet click as the spring pushes the bolt fully forward. Click. It is a satisfying sound, the sound of completion, of successful engagement. This is the sound the merchant will hear when he locks his strongbox, the sound that will tell him his gold is safe. Click. But before delivery, the lock must be tested, truly tested, not just cycled on the workbench, but subjected to the stresses it will experience in actual use. The locksmith has a testing frame, a wooden frame that simulates a door. He mounts the lock to the frame, secures it with screws through mounting holes in the lock plate. Now he tests, inserts the key, turns it, the bolt retracts, he removes the key, the bolt extends, click again, insert, turn, retract, remove, extend, click. He repeats this cycle 50 times, 100 times. The motion never changes. The mechanism never binds, never hesitates. The lock is reliable. He tests with force, tries to force the bolt back without the key, presses hard against the extended bolt. The bolt resists, the spring resists. The bolt does not move, not even slightly. The spring is strong enough. The design is sound. He tests the key in different positions, inserts it quickly, slowly, at an angle. Each time the key finds its way through the wards, each time it engages the bolt, each time the mechanism responds correctly. The tolerances are right. The lock is forgiving of small variations in how the key is inserted, but only the correct key. Any other key would still fail. The lock passes every test. It is ready. The next morning the merchant arrives. He is expected. The lock was commissioned 3 weeks ago, a special order. The merchant is wealthy, trades in spices and silks, has accumulated considerable wealth, but wealth attracts thieves. He needs security, has heard of the locksmith's reputation, has come to purchase the finest lock in the city. The locksmith greets him at the door, unlocks the workshop door with his own key. Click. The merchant hears the sound, nods approvingly. They enter the workshop together. The finished lock sits on the workbench. The locksmith has polished it one final time. The iron gleams, dark grey, almost black, but with a subtle sheen. The craftsmanship is evident even to an untrained eye. The edges are clean, the surface smooth. This is quality work. The locksmith picks up the lock and hands it to the merchant. The merchant takes it, feels the weight. This is important. Weight means substance, means real iron, not some cheap alloy, not thin sheet metal. This lock is solid, heavy, perhaps 3 pounds. The weight is reassuring. The merchant examines the lock, turns it over, looks at the rivets. They are neatly formed, uniform. He looks at the keyhole. It is clean, precise. He nods. Good. The locksmith hands him the key. The merchant inserts it. The key slides in smoothly, encounters no resistance. This is good. Some locks are difficult to use, keys that must be jiggled, forced, but not this one. The key goes in like it belongs there, because it does. The merchant turns the key, feels the bolt move, the resistance of the spring, but not too much resistance, just enough to know the lock is working. He releases the key, feels it rotate back slightly, hears the click as the bolt extends. Click. He smiles this sound. This is the sound of security, of his wealth protected, of his secrets kept. He cycles the lark several times. Each time it works perfectly. Each time the click. He is satisfied. They discuss the price. It is high. A lark of this quality is expensive, represents many hours of skilled labor. The merchant does not argue. He understands value, understands that true security cannot be cheap. He counts out silver coins, places them on the workbench. The locksmith counts them, nods. The transaction is complete. The merchant wraps the lark in cloth. Carefully, protectively, this lark will secure his strong box, the box where he keeps his most valuable documents, deeds to property, contracts, letters of credit, things more valuable than gold because they represent gold, future gold, potential wealth. He thanks the locksmith, shakes his hand. The locksmith's hand is rough, calloused, scarred, the hand of a craftsman. The merchant's hand is soft, smooth, the hand of someone who works with paper and ink, not metal. They are different men. But in this moment they are connected. The craftsman has created security. The merchant has purchased it. Both are satisfied. The merchant leaves. The locksmith watches him go, sees him walk down the street, clutching the wrapped lark. Protective. Already it is precious to him. Already it represents safety. The locksmith returns to his workshop, closes the door, locks it. His own lock, his own key. Click, the familiar sound. The sound that tells him his tools are secure, his knowledge protected, his workshop sealed. The coins sit on the workbench. Silver coins, payment for his work. He counts them again, not because he doesn't trust the merchant, but because it feels good. Tangible evidence of value created, of skill rewarded. He places the coins in a small iron box, his own strong box, with its own lock. A lock he made years ago, one of his first. Simpler than the one he just sold, but still functional, still secure. He locks the box, his personal gold, his accumulated wealth, protected by his own work. There is a symmetry to this, a rightness. The workshop is quiet now. The day's work is done. The sun is setting. Golden light slants through the window, illuminates the tools on the bench, the files, the hammers, the chisels, each one precisely where it belongs, each one ready for tomorrow's work. Tomorrow there will be another lark to make, another key to cut. The work never ends. The world is full of things that need protecting, doors that need securing, secrets that need keeping, and the locksmith will continue to create the guardians, the iron puzzles, the mechanisms that stand between chaos and order. But for now, for this evening, the work is complete. The locksmith extinguishes the candle. The workshop darkens. He moves to the door. His hand finds the key in his pocket. The master key. The key to this workshop. The key that unlocks this lock and no other. He steps outside, pulls the door closed behind him. The latch engages with a soft sound. Then he inserts his key, turns it, feels the bolt slide. Hears the click. Click. The workshop is locked, secure, nothing can enter. The tools are safe. The knowledge is protected. The secrets of the locksmith's craft remain secret. He walks home through the streets of the city. The sun has set now, twilight. The streets are growing dark, but they are not dangerous, not yet, because throughout the city other locks are engaging. Other bolts are sliding home, merchants locking their shops, householders securing their homes, the wealthy protecting their treasures. Click, click, click. The sound echoes through the streets, a symphony of security, of barriers being set, of the world being secured for the night. The locksmith reaches his own home, a small house, modest, but it has a good lock. He made it himself, of course. He unlocks the door, enters. His wife greets him. Supper is waiting, the smell of bread, of stew, home. After supper he sits by the fire. The flames dance, cast moving shadows on the walls. He is tired, good tired. The tiredness that comes from honest work, from creation. He thinks about the lock he finished today, wonders where it is now, probably already installed, already doing its job, already standing guard over the merchant's wealth. And somewhere across the city, the merchant is also sitting by his fire, feeling secure, feeling safe, because his strongbox is locked, protected by the finest lock in the city, by a mechanism so precise, so well crafted that it will last for generations. His children will inherit that lock, and their children. The iron will outlast them all. This is the locksmith's legacy, not fame, not fortune, but the quiet satisfaction of work well done, of mechanisms that function, of security provided. He has made the world a slightly safer place, one lock at a time. He grows drowsy, the fire is warm, the house is secure, his own door is locked, his own bolt extended. Click. The sound is in his memory, in his bones, the sound of his life's work. His wife banks the fire, covers the coals with ash. They will smolder through the night. Keep the house warm. They climb the stairs to their sleeping chamber. The bed is soft, the blankets warm. The locksmith's head settles into the pillow. His breathing slows, deepens. Outside the city sleeps. Doors are locked. Windows are shuttered. Bolts are extended. Springs are compressed. Wards stand ready. Keys hang on pegs or rest in pockets. The guardians are at their posts, silent, vigilant, made of iron and craft and the locksmith's skill. And somewhere in a dark workshop, behind a locked door, the tools wait on their bench. The files, the hammers, the chisels, ready for tomorrow, ready to create more locks, more keys, more security, more of those satisfying clicks that mean the world is ordered, protected, safe. The locksmith's breathing becomes rhythmic. Sleep approaches. He thinks in that space between waking and dreaming about the sound. The click. The sound of the bolt sliding home. The sound of engagement, of security, of completion. Click. It is a good sound. A sound that means his work is done. A sound that means protection is in place. A sound that lets the world rest. That lets people sleep. That lets wealth be stored and secrets be kept and valuable things remain safe. Click. The sound fades, becomes part of the night, part of the darkness, part of the security that blankets the sleeping city. The locksmith sleeps, his wife sleeps, the merchant sleeps, the city sleeps, all protected by iron and springs and the precise work of skilled hands. The workshop is dark, the forge is cold, the tools are still. But tomorrow they will wake again, will sing their songs again, the rasp of the file, the ring of the hammer, the click of the lock, the eternal cycle of creation and protection, of chaos being ordered, of raw iron becoming security. But tonight all is still, all is quiet, all is safe. The bolts are extended, the springs are compressed, the wards are positioned, the keys are where they belong, everything is in its place, everything is locked, everything is secure. Sleep comes easily to the locksmith. He has earned his rest, has done his work well, has created security with his hands and his knowledge and his patience. Tomorrow there will be more work, more locks to make, more keys to cut, more clicks to create. But tonight there is only sleep, deep sleep, secure sleep, the sleep of a person whose work is valuable, whose skill is recognized, whose craft makes the world safer. And as the bolts slide home and the latches click shut across the city, the secrets are safe for another night. The work is done. Sleep well.